Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Paper Mario, Mickey Speedway USA, Mario Tennis. Each of these games have a few things in common. They are among the very first video games I ever played. They are some of my favorite games I've ever played. And they were all released on the Nintendo 64 console. The Nintendo 64 is a home video game console developed and released by Nintendo in 1996. Of all the discussions among retro gaming circles, it seems, more than any other console, that there is a great deal of nostalgia on the internet for this console, likely because it was the last major console before the onset of the internet era. So many of us who grew up with the formation and mainstream application of the internet also grew up with this console as our earliest gaming memories. In honor of this console, which defined my earliest formative years, in this video, we are going to go over every entry in the Nintendo 64 Iceberg, from the history to the hardware to the games themselves. There's no need for a long-winded introduction with this one, we all know why we're here. So let's dive in to the Nintendo 64 Iceberg. L is Real 2401 is a popular theory and Easter egg tied to the absence of Luigi in the Nintendo 64 game Super Mario 64. The game was initially intended to be a two-player experience featuring both Mario and Luigi, but hardware limitations led to Luigi being removed. Eventually, players found in the game's castle courtyard a statue with a blurry inscription, which sparked fan speculation. Some interpreted the text as reading L is Real 2401, believing the L hinted at Luigi's hidden presence in the game. One theory suggests that collecting all the gold coins, possibly equaling 2,401 total coins, would unlock Luigi as a playable character. On July 25, 2020, 24 years and 1 month after the game's release, Super Mario 64's source code leaked online, and the files contained Luigi's character model, confirming he was once planned for the game. Luigi was also set to appear in the game's sequel, intended for release on the Nintendo 64 DD, but that project was cancelled due to the console add-on's commercial failure. The backwards long jump, commonly abbreviated as the BLJ, is a well-known glitch in Super Mario 64 that takes advantage of the game's lack of a backward speed limit during long jumps. This technique became widely recognized through its frequent use in speedrunning, particularly in the 0-star and 16-star categories, where players aim to complete the game with far fewer stars than normally required. By using BLJs, players can bypass doors and barriers that would typically require collecting stars. To perform a backwards long jump, the player must initiate a long jump while holding the control stick backward, while Mario is in a position where he remains on the ground while doing this. The player then continues to rapidly press the long jump button, and if done correctly, Mario will begin accelerating rapidly, gaining enough speed to break through boundaries. In a typical speedrun, the BLJ is executed 4 times. The first instance is on the ground floor, where Mario clips into a pillar and performs a BLJ against a wall to pass through the 8-star door. The second occurs in the basement, where Mario uses a small staircase to BLJ past both the 30-star door and the portal to Dire Docks. The third is on the second floor, where the trick is used on the stairs to reach the 3rd floor by phasing through a wall. The final use is on the infamous Endless Stairs, where Mario gains enough speed with a BLJ to override the staircase's looping effect and reach the final area of the game. End labels are small identifiers printed on the short ends of items like video game cartridges, designed to make it easier to recognize them in organized storage situations. These labels are especially useful for collectors and enthusiasts who maintain large libraries of media. Nintendo 64 cartridges lack end labels, which make identifying games in a neatly stored collection somewhat frustrating. Many fans have criticized Nintendo for this, attributing it to cost-cutting decisions. However, a broader look at the industry reveals that several other systems from the same era, such as the Sega Saturn, Atari Jaguar, Atari Lynx, Game Gear, and Game Boy Advance, also featured cartridges without end labels. This suggests that the lack of end labels was more likely part of a wider design choice focused on aesthetics, rather than a specific effort by Nintendo to reduce manufacturing costs. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is a 1998 action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo. It was the first entry in the Legend of Zelda series to feature 3D graphics, marking a major evolution in the franchise. In the game, players control the protagonist Link as he journeys across the realm of Hyrule to thwart the evil King Ganondorf. The adventure involves time travel, dungeon exploration, and navigating a vast overworld. Ocarina of Time also introduced innovative gameplay mechanics, such as target lock system and context-sensitive buttons, both of which went on to influence the design of 3D games that followed. Upon release, the game received widespread critical and commercial acclaim. Reviewers and players praised nearly every aspect of the experience, including its visuals, gameplay, music, and storytelling. It has consistently been ranked among the greatest video games of all time, and remains the highest-rated game on Metacritic to this day. The expansion pack was an accessory released for the N64 in 1998. It was designed to be inserted into the console's memory expansion slot, replacing the default jumper pack. Its primary purpose was to enhance the system's performance by increasing its RAM capacity. With the expansion pack installed, the Nintendo 64's RAM was doubled from 4 MB to 8 MB. This upgrade enabled supported games to feature improved graphics, including higher screen resolutions, more detailed textures, and extended draw distances. Several games took advantage of the expansion pack's capabilities. While many titles were simply enhanced by the additional memory, a few games, such as Donkey Kong 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, required it to run. However, not all interactions with the expansion pack went particularly well. Space Station Silicon Valley, for instance, would crash in its original USA release due to a bug triggered when the expansion pack was used. Cartridges offered several advantages over CD-ROMs, including greater durability, faster load times, and in some cases, built-in battery backup for saving game progress. Despite these benefits, cartridges were extremely costly to manufacture and had limited storage capacity during the 1990s. These limitations placed Nintendo at a significant disadvantage compared to Sony's PlayStation, which used the cheaper and more spacious CD-ROM format. While PlayStation CD-ROMs reportedly cost around $1 to produce at the time, cartridges for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System could cost up to $15, and Nintendo 64 cartridges were even pricier, with some costing more than $30 to manufacture. These higher production costs were typically passed on to consumers, resulting in Nintendo 64 games generally being more expensive than PlayStation titles. While PlayStation games rarely exceeded a retail price of $50, equivalent to about $100 in 2024, certain Nintendo 64 games, such as the first print of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, were sold for as much as $79.99, which would be around $154 today. The high expense and storage limitations of cartridges, combined with Nintendo's restrictive publishing policies and less favorable terms for developers, led to the alienation of many major third-party developers and publishers, something which would have significantly enhanced the catalog of games available on the Nintendo 64. In the original Mario Party, some minigames required players to rapidly rotate the analog stick. Many players discovered that using their palms instead of their thumbs allowed for faster input, but this often led to minor injuries such as blisters, friction burns, and lacerations due to the uncomfortable design of the controller's stick. While no lawsuits were filed, around 90 complaints were submitted to the New York Attorney General's office. As a result, Nintendo of America reached a settlement that included covering $75,000 in legal fees and offering protective gloves to injured players. The cost of supplying the estimated 1.2 million gloves was projected to be as high as $80 million. In more recent releases, such as Mario Party Superstars and the Nintendo Classics version of the original Mario Party, Nintendo now includes on-screen warnings advising players not to use their palms when rotating the stick to prevent injury and damage to the controller. This entry is referring to game titles that end in the number 64. Approximately 15% of all Nintendo 64 games ended in this number. They are, in alphabetical order, Asteroids Hyper 64, Base Hunter 64, Bomberman 64, Bomberman 64 The Second Attack, Carmageddon 64, Destruction Derby 64, Donkey Kong 64, Doom 64, Dr. Mario 64, Duke Nukem 64, Excite Bike 64, F1 Pole Position 64, FIFA Soccer 64, Fighting Force 64, Forsaken 64, Gex 64 Enter the Gecko, Golden Nugget 64, GT 64 Championship Edition, International Superstar Soccer 64, Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, Madden Football 64, Mario Kart 64, Mega Man 64, Micro Machines 64 Turbo, Monster Truck Madness 64, Namco Museum 64, Nuclear Strike 64, Ogre Battle 64, Person of Lordly Caliber, Pilot Wings 64, Quest 64, Ridge Racer 64, Road Rash 64, Robotron 64, Shadowgate 64 Trials of the Four Towers, Star Fox 64, StarCraft 64, Stunt Racer 64, Super Mario 64, Superman 64, Virtual Chess 64, Virtual Pool 64, Wave Race 64, and Wipeout 64. Rare Limited is a British video game developer. Rare's early advancements in 3D graphics using Silicon Graphics systems caught Nintendo's attention, leading to a partnership beginning in 1994. Impressed by Rare's technical capabilities, Nintendo initially purchased a 25% stake in the company, which later increased to 49%. This investment effectively made Rare a second-party developer for Nintendo. During the Nintendo 64 era, Rare became one of the platform's most prominent and prolific developers. They created a number of iconic and critically acclaimed titles, including Killer Instinct, GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Perfect Dark, Mickey Speedway USA, and Conker's Bad Fur Day. The Nintendo 64 controller was one of the first to prominently feature a control stick, a thumb-operated analog stick, at its center, revolutionizing how players interacted with games. Unlike traditional D-pads, which could only detect movement in 8 directions, the control stick allowed for 360-degree input, enabling much more precise movement and camera control. This innovation played a key role in enhancing gameplay in the emerging era of 3D environments. While joysticks have been used in gaming for decades, the Nintendo 64 set itself apart by incorporating a thumbstick directly into the main controller design. Prior to this, the only known console accessory to include a thumbstick was the Mega Drive's XE1AP, a third-party device released by Dempa in 1989. The success and impact of the Nintendo 64's control stick helped popularize thumbsticks as a standard feature in modern game controllers, shaping the future of controller design across the industry. GoldenEye 007 is a 1997 first-person shooter developed by Rare and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. Based on the 1995 James Bond film GoldenEye, the game puts players in the role of secret agent James Bond, who must thwart a criminal syndicate from using a deadly satellite weapon. Players progress through a series of missions while engaging in combat with enemies. The game also featured a highly praised split-screen multiplayer mode, allowing up to 4 players to compete in various deathmatch scenarios. The game marked a turning point for first-person shooters on home consoles, proving that the genre could thrive outside of the PC gaming space. At a time when first-person shooters were largely associated with titles like Doom, GoldenEye 007 introduced a more realistic and immersive approach. It pioneered stealth mechanics, widescreen support, and console-based multiplayer deathmatches. Upon release, GoldenEye 007 was widely regarded as the best multiplayer experience on the Nintendo 64 and helped redefine expectations for console shooters. It played a critical role in demonstrating that both single-player and multiplayer FPS gameplay could be fun and engaging on a console. The game's legacy is immense, often cited as one of the most influential video games of all time, and credited with paving the way for later console FPS giants like Halo and Call of Duty. The Funtastic series of Nintendo 64 consoles were special edition re-releases introduced in Europe, designed with vibrant translucent colors. These consoles came in 6 distinct variants: Smoke, Ice Blue, Watermelon Red, Jungle Green, Grape Purple, and Fire Orange. Their bold and colorful designs make them especially popular among collectors, offering a visually striking alternative to the standard gray model. Mario Kart 64 is a 1996 kart racing game and the second installment in the Mario Kart series following 1992's Super Mario Kart. The game continues the core gameplay formula of its predecessor, with players choosing characters from the Mario franchise to race against each other on a variety of tracks. Each track features unique obstacles designed to slow racers down, along with item boxes that provide power-ups, such as shells and speed boosts, to help players gain an edge or defend against opponents. This combination of racing mechanics and chaotic item usage became a defining feature of the series. Following its release, Mario Kart 64 received several award nominations and, over time, has been recognized as one of the greatest video games of all time. It maintains a dedicated speedrunning scene that continues to explore the game's mechanics and shortcuts in competitive play. I highly recommend checking out some of Summoning Salt's Mario Kart 64 speedrunning documentaries, as they are some of the best content available on all of YouTube. Project 64 is a free and open source Nintendo 64 emulator for Microsoft Windows. It allows users to play N64 games on their PCs, offering features beyond those found in Nintendo's official Virtual Console emulation. However, the emulator faced controversy in earlier versions. Up until version 2.2, there were widespread concerns about the safety of installing Project 64 through its official installer, as multiple reports surfaced on social media alleging the presence of malware. This issue was addressed in July of 2016, when the malware code was removed from both the source code and installer files. The Rumble Pack is an accessory for N64 controllers that provides force feedback during gameplay. When supported by a game, the Rumble Pack vibrates in response to in-game events like firing weapons or taking damage, enhancing player immersion by adding tactile sensations. The device is powered by two AAA batteries and plugs into the controller's memory cartridge slot. However, this design means the Rumble Pack cannot be used simultaneously with the Controller Pack, a memory and accessory used for saving game data. While this was not a major issue for games that saved directly on the cartridge, it posed challenges for titles that required the Controller Pack to save progress. Most games were not designed to support hot swapping between these accessories during play, although some allowed saving via a second controller's Controller Pack. Nintendo addressed this limitation in later titles by including special screens that guided players through the process of swapping accessories without losing data. The Fun Machine is a nickname for the Nintendo 64 console, which was featured on some Nintendo 64 packaging and marketing. Silicon Graphics Incorporated was an American company specializing in high-performance computing hardware and software. In early 1993, Silicon signed a deal with Nintendo to develop the Reality Coprocessor, a graphics processing unit that would be used in the Nintendo 64. The partnership was publicly announced in August of the same year. The Reality Coprocessor was highly innovative for its time, delivering 64-bit graphics output, a major leap forward compared to most contemporary consoles, which were still transitioning from 8-bit to 32-bit architectures. The advanced capabilities of the RCP helped position the Nintendo 64 as a cutting-edge system in the mid-1990s gaming market, with technology that many considered futuristic. The banjo-kazooie Stop and Swap was a planned feature by Rare for the Nintendo 64 games Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. This feature would have allowed players to unlock special in-game content by transferring items between the two games. Specifically, players would collect a special egg in Banjo-Kazooie, then quickly swap the cartridge to Banjo-Tooie, unlocking exclusive items. The ability to transfer data this way was possible due to a quirk in the Nintendo 64 hardware that caused the system's RAM to retain data longer than intended. However, Nintendo ultimately requested that Rare remove the feature, citing concerns about potential damage to the console and because future hardware revisions might clear the RAM faster, making the swap impossible to execute reliably. As a result, the stop and swap feature was cancelled before it could be fully implemented. Super Mario 64, released in 1996, is a platform game developed and published by Nintendo. It was the first Super Mario title to feature fully 3D gameplay, blending the franchise's traditional gameplay, visual style, and characters with expansive open-world environments. The story centers on Bowser invading Peach's castle and hiding its protective power stars across various worlds accessed through magical paintings. Players control Mario as he collects these power stars to unlock parts of the castle, ultimately confronting Bowser and rescuing Princess Peach. The game was highly anticipated before its release, fueled by strong marketing efforts and impressive demonstrations at the 1996 E3 trade show. Upon launch, Super Mario 64 received widespread critical acclaim for its ambitious design, visuals, level layouts, and innovative gameplay. While some reviewers noted issues with the virtual camera system, the game quickly became the best-selling title on the Nintendo 64. Its influence extends far beyond its original release, inspiring a vast community of fans who have created numerous fan games, mods, and hacks that expand or reimagine its gameplay. The game also holds a prominent place in the speedrunning community, with players continually discovering new techniques and glitches to complete it as quickly as possible. In addition to its technical legacy, Super Mario 64 has been the subject of enduring fan theories and rumors about hidden features, contributing to its lasting impact on gaming culture. The DK Rap is the introductory theme song for the 1999 Nintendo 64 game Donkey Kong 64. The song's lyrics were written by Rare designer George Andreas, who also performed the vocals, while composer Grant Kirkhope created the melody. Additional vocals for the chorus were provided by other members of the Rare development team. The rap serves as a character introduction, describing the 5 playable characters featured in the game. Upon its release, the DK Rap was received negatively, with many critics and players labeling it one of the worst songs in video game history, due to its awkward lyrics and tone. However, over time, it has become a notable part of internet meme culture. The song has since gained an ironic cult following due to its nostalgic and comedic value. Mupen 64 Plus is another free and open source Nintendo 64 emulator. Super Smash Bros. Is a 1999 crossover fighting game developed by HAL Laboratory. The game brings together characters and settings from various Nintendo franchises including Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Star Fox, Yoshi, Donkey Kong, Metroid, F-Zero, Mother, Kirby, and Pokemon. Players battle each other using characters' unique abilities and take advantage of stage hazards, with the primary goal of knocking opponents off the stage rather than just depleting a traditional health bar. Super Smash Bros. Received generally favorable reviews, praised for its novel concept and entertaining multiplayer gameplay. The game's success led to the creation of the now legendary franchise, spawning several sequels that have been critically acclaimed and commercially successful. As of 2024, the Smash Bros. Series has sold over 76 million units worldwide, with multiple entries considered among the greatest video games of all time. When Donkey Kong 64 launched in 1999, it became the first Nintendo 64 title to require the system's 8MB expansion pack in order to function. Marketing campaigns claimed this was due to the game's massive scale, suggesting it couldn't run without the additional memory. However, in a recent director's commentary video for Conker's Bad Fur Day, programmer Chris Marlowe revealed the real reason behind the expansion pack requirement: a game-breaking glitch. According to Marlowe, the glitch would randomly cause the game to crash when running on the N64 standard 4MB of memory. Despite efforts to resolve the issue, Rare couldn't pinpoint the exact cause, and was ultimately compelled to bundle the expansion pack with the game at no extra cost. This solution, while necessary, resulted in significant financial cost to both Rare and Nintendo. Interestingly, this situation had a silver lining. Chris Seavor, a former Rare employee and the voice of Conker, noted in the same video that the incident indirectly benefited Perfect Dark, released a year later. That game truly needed the expansion pack to unlock all of its gameplay features. With the accessory already in the hands of many players thanks to Donkey Kong 64, Perfect Dark reached a wider audience and eventually sold over 3 million copies worldwide. The Nintendo 64 was originally going to be named the Ultra 64. This name was publicly announced on June 23, 1994, during the Consumer Electronics Show, where Nintendo showcased the console's design. Nintendo intended to release the console as the Ultra Famicom in Japan and the Nintendo Ultra 64 internationally. Although speculation arose that a trademark conflict with Konami's Ultra Games prompted a change, Nintendo denied this, instead citing a desire to unify its branding globally. The final name, the Nintendo 64, was suggested by Earthbound creator Shigetsu Itoi. In the late 90s and early 2000s, it was quite common to find kiosks inside of McDonald's which had Nintendo 64 controllers attached to them, allowing people to play preloaded Nintendo 64 games. I vividly remember one of my local McDonald's having one of these with Mario Golf on it, so I was hit with a heavy dose of nostalgia upon seeing images of these kiosks. The jumper pack was designed for the Nintendo 64's memory port. Its sole purpose was to terminate the Rambus memory bus when the expansion pack was not in use, ensuring the system could operate properly. Without either the jumper pack or the expansion pack installed, the console could not display any image on the TV screen. Early versions of the Nintendo 64, released before the expansion pack became available, came with the jumper pack already pre-installed. Unlike other accessories, the jumper pack was not sold in retail stores and could only be obtained separately through Nintendo's official online store. The 64DD was a peripheral developed by Nintendo to expand the capabilities of the Nintendo 64 through the use of magnetic discs and online connectivity. First announced in 1995, before the Nintendo 64's 1996 launch, the device experienced numerous delays and was ultimately released only in Japan on December 11, 1999. The name 64DD refers to the peripheral's disk drive. Despite its innovative features, including expanded storage and internet functionality, the 64DD failed to achieve commercial success and had a very limited run. The peripheral connected to the underside of the Nintendo 64 via an expansion port, enabling features such as rewritable data storage on 64MB magnetic discs, a built-in real-time clock for persistent in-game events, and the inclusion of a standardized font and audio library to conserve space. One of its most ambitious features was its ability to connect to the internet through a dedicated online service called RandNet, which offered online gaming, media sharing, and even e-commerce options. However, the 64DD was discontinued by February of 2001 after the release of only 10 software titles. RandNet was a market failure, peaking at a modest 15,000 subscribers. It was never launched outside Japan, and many games initially planned for the platform were either cancelled, reworked for the standard Nintendo 64, or eventually released on the more powerful GameCube. In early development screenshots of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, the iconic Triforce, central to the franchise's mythology, was prominently featured, leading fans to believe it would play a major role in the game's plot. However, in the final release, the Triforce is absent. Adding to the mystery, the game's inventory screen includes a darkened image of the full Triforce, implying that it was once intended to be a collectible item. This visual cue sparked widespread speculation and rumors among players that the Triforce was still hidden in the game and could be unlocked through secret methods. One of the most well-known of these theories involved playing a hidden ocarina song called the Overture of Sages before obtaining the Master Sword. Despite the persistence of these rumors over the years, data mining and hacking efforts have confirmed that there is no such song and no functional Triforce item coded into the game. Hey You Pikachu is a virtual pet Pokemon spin-off for the Nintendo 64 developed by Umbrella. In the game, the player assumes the role of a child chosen to test Professor Oak's latest invention, the PokeHelper, a device designed to enable communication with Pokemon. The player soon encounters a wild Pikachu, builds trust with it, and eventually welcomes it into their in-game home. The gameplay is structured around 3 themed activity days: Daring Days, Discovery Days, and Play Days, each offering unique objectives like collecting food or fishing. Completing these tasks earns the players Pika Points, which can be spent at Abra's shop to unlock various items. A defining feature of Hey You Pikachu is its use of the voice recognition unit, a Nintendo 64 accessory that interprets human speech through a microphone. This allowed players to directly talk to Pikachu using a vocabulary of 256 recognized words. Hey You Pikachu is one of only 2 games to utilize the VRU, the other being the Japanese train simulator Densha Dego 64. The game's narrative unfolds over the course of 365 in-game days. At the end of this period, Professor Oak informs the player that Pikachu, as a wild Pokemon, must return to the forest. In a heartfelt farewell sequence, the player repeatedly says goodbye until Pikachu realizes it must leave. However, after the credits roll, Pikachu unexpectedly returns to the player's yard, allowing the game to continue. Clay Fighter 63 1/3 is a 1997 fighting game for the Nintendo 64, developed and published by Interplay Productions. As with its predecessor, Clay Fighter and Clay Fighter 2 Judgment Clay, the game used stop-motion animation and claymation instead of traditional computer graphics, giving it a distinct and quirky visual style. Despite its unique look, Clay Fighter 63 1/3 was poorly received by critics who cited issues with its gameplay mechanics and animation quality. Interplay later released an enhanced version of the game titled Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut on May 15, 1998. This edition was released exclusively as a rental through Blockbuster Video in North America and was never made widely available for retail sale. However, Blockbuster did run an online contest where players could win a copy of the game. Sculptor's Cut featured several updates including revised storylines, improved menu navigation, combat system tweaks, and a new introduction sequence with vocal lyrics. Most significantly, it restored 4 of the 5 characters cut from the original version, bringing the total roster to 16 fighters. Because of its limited distribution and the general wear and tear from rental use, copies of Sculptor's Cut became extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors. By the early 2010s, the value of the game had surged. A copy of the game fetched around $1,100, while the instruction manual typically sold for $500 to $600, making it one of the most valuable Nintendo 64 titles on the collector's market. GameShark is a well-known brand name for video game cheat devices designed for various console systems. These devices, typically in the form of cartridges or discs, allows players to modify a game's code, enabling cheats such as infinite lives, unlocked levels, or invincibility. On systems like the Nintendo 64, players could load cheat codes directly onto the console's memory using a GameShark cartridge. Once the desired codes were loaded and the game was launched, the cheats would automatically apply. In addition to its core cheating functionality, the Nintendo 64 version of the GameShark also served as a region lockout bypass, allowing players to run games from any region on a single console, something normally restricted by the system's regional limitations. Marty the Thwomp is a fan characterization of a caged thwomp found on the Bowser's Castle track of Mario Kart 64. This thwomp's eerie green appearance, caused by the level's yellow lighting, and its unsettling laughter towards passing racers contributed to its mystique, sparking rumors and urban legends within the game's community. Drawing comparisons to the myths surrounding Luigi's hidden presence in Mario 64, players speculated that Marty was a secret, unlockable character. One of the most well-known rumors claimed that players could free Marty and unlock him by performing a specific sequence, choosing Bowser as a character, circling a garden statue 3 times, completing a lap in reverse, and then circling the statue 3 more times in the opposite direction. Supposedly, this would cause Marty to escape his cage. However, thorough analysis of Mario Kart 64's ROM has shown no data or assets supporting the existence of green thwomps or unlockable characters, confirming that Marty is merely a product of fan speculation and yellow lighting. A sealed copy of Super Mario 64 sold for a record-breaking $1.56 million at a Heritage Auctions event in Dallas, marking the highest price ever paid for a single video game at auction. The sale, which took place on July 11, 2021, surpassed the previous record set just 2 days earlier by a copy of The Legend of Zelda for the NES, which sold for $870,000. The Transfer Pack is a Nintendo 64 accessory designed to facilitate data exchange between the N64 and compatible Game Boy or Game Boy Color games. It plugs into the console's expansion port and features a slot for Game Boy cartridges, enabling players to access extra content when supported titles are connected. Most notably, the Transfer Pack was initially bundled with Pokémon Stadium, which allowed players not only to transfer Pokémon from their Game Boy games, but also to emulate specific Game Boy Pokémon titles directly onto the Nintendo 64. Between 1998 and 2000, the Transfer Pack was supported by 20 games for the N64 and 64DD systems, though only 6 of these were released outside of Japan. A notable example of the Transfer Pack's use is in Mario Tennis. Players could transfer characters from the Game Boy version's Mario Tour mode to the N64 version, allowing those characters to gain experience during gameplay and then send the progress back to the handheld version. Connecting the two versions also unlocked additional content such as Yoshi, Wario, Waluigi, and Bowser as playable characters in the Game Boy game, each with their own minigames. Completing those minigames and reconnecting the two systems would unlock new tennis courts in the N64 version. Nintendo 64 related marketing has a history of crafting goofy and bizarre commercials. There are some great compilations for these on YouTube, and I highly recommend looking some of them up. I'll link one in the description of this video. Paper Mario was originally conceived as Super Mario RPG 2 and was initially planned for release on the Nintendo 64 DD. However, due to legal complications with Square Enix and the commercial failure of the 64 DD, the project underwent significant changes. As a result, the game was rebranded as Paper Mario, and development was shifted to the standard Nintendo 64 console. The core gameplay remained reminiscent of its predecessor, blending role-playing elements and turn-based combat. Very little is known about the game's original form as Super Mario RPG 2. No prototypes or beta versions of the earlier iteration have been made public, and minimal information exists regarding how it might have differed from the final product. As previously mentioned in the Hey You Pikachu entry, the voice recognition unit was a unique peripheral released by Nintendo in 2000 for the Nintendo 64. Designed to enable voice interaction with specific games, the VRU consisted of two main components: a gray processing unit that plugged into one of the console's controller ports, and a gray microphone that connected to the VRU itself. The unit functioned by converting the player's spoken words into signals that compatible game software could interpret. To improve usability, the VRU packaged also with a strap to attach the microphone to the N64 controller. This setup allowed players to interact with in-game characters through voice commands, making it one of the more innovative and experimental accessories released during the N64 era. Conker's Bad Fur Day is a 2001 platform game developed by Rare, notable for its mature content and darkly comedic tone, an unusual departure from the family-friendly style typical of Nintendo 64 titles. The game stars Conker, a foul-mouthed, hard-drinking red squirrel who, after a night of heavy drinking, attempts to make his way home to his girlfriend Barry. The gameplay primarily involves navigating a series of linear challenges that combine platforming, puzzles, and combat. A multiplayer mode is also included, allowing up to 4 players to compete in 7 different game types. Though visually similar to Rare's earlier platformers like Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, and Banjo-Tooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day was developed with a distinctly mature audience in mind. The game features explicit content such as graphic violence, strong language, and alcohol use, while also featuring numerous pop culture references. The humor leans heavily into the crude and absurd, breaking the fourth wall frequently and spoofing iconic films such as The Matrix, Aliens, Jaws, A Clockwork Orange, Apocalypse Now, and more. These parodies inspired not just the writing but also the game's music, sound design, and level mechanics. For instance, the Matrix-style lobby shootout influenced composer Robin Beanland's use of interactive music that shifted based on in-game action. Initially, the developers focused on gameplay mechanics, but as production evolved, they found themselves building levels around comedic concepts, especially the movie parodies. Released in March of 2001 with a marketing campaign aimed at college-aged males, the game earned critical acclaim for its humor, visuals, sound, and inventive gameplay. However, its commercial performance was disappointing, largely due to minimal advertising and its late arrival on the N64's life cycle. Despite this, Conker's Bad Fur Day has since gained a devoted cult following and is often cited by critics as one of the best Nintendo 64 games and among the greatest video games of all time. Ronaldinho's Soccer 64, released in January 1998, is a hack of International Superstar Soccer 64, created by the Peruvian group Twin Eagles. This game is notable as one of the few unlicensed or bootleg titles to appear on the Nintendo 64, as the platform is known for its strong built-in copyright protections. Due to the lack of a legitimate checking integrated circuit chip, a security feature designed by Nintendo to prevent unauthorized software, the game requires an N64 passport peripheral to bypass the console's lockout system and run properly. The CIC lockout chip was developed in response to the North American video game crash of 1983. It was part of a broader strategy to maintain publishing quality by forcing third-party developers to submit games for approval. Devices like the N64 Passport were created to bypass this system, allowing bootleg or region-locked games to be played. The Twin Eagles group, originally part of the Commodore 64 demo scene, was one of the earliest groups from Peru to become prominent in the pirating and hacking scene. In the hacked version of Ronaldinho's Soccer 64, the original generic teams and players are swapped out for real-life counterparts, and a Brazilian soccer club has been added. The core gameplay remains unchanged from the original title, although the game was localized with Portuguese text and voice clips. In the United States, Nintendo used slogans like "Change the System" and "Get In or Get Out" to market the Nintendo 64 console. Specifically, "Get In or Get Out" was featured in several North American commercials promoting the console. In the early stages of developing its next console, the Sega Saturn, Tom Kalinske, then president of Sega of America, showed interest in utilizing Silicon Graphics' advanced 3D graphics technology. SGI had developed a CPU based on its MIPS R4000 family, which was significantly more efficient, consuming only 0.5 watts of power compared to the typical 1.5 to 2 watts, and far more affordable, targeting a price of around $40 versus the usual $80 to $200. Jim Clark, SGI's founder, presented this promising new video game system design to Kalinske in hopes of forming a partnership with a major player in the gaming industry. Kalinske and Joe Miller from Sega of America were impressed and facilitated a meeting between SGI and Sega's hardware team from Japan. However, Sega's engineers identified hardware issues in SGI's early prototype. Although SGI eventually resolved these issues, Sega had already decided to reject the proposal. Later, Nintendo became SGI's partner, leading to the Nintendo 64. Crow 64, better known as Catastrophe Crow, is a fictional lost Nintendo 64 game that became the centerpiece of a popular creepypasta and alternate reality game, or ARG. The project was created by writer and director duo Adam and Luke Butcher, who crafted an intricate and eerie narrative around the supposed discovery of the game. The story has gained a cult following due to its mysterious and unsettling content, with fans piecing together hidden messages and lore through a variety of media. Given the depth and complexity of Catastrophe Crow, I recommend watching one of the numerous breakdown videos available on YouTube about the topic, as summarizing it in brief wouldn't do justice to the rich storytelling. The Nintendo 64 makes a brief appearance in the Gravity Falls episode Seuss and the Real Girl, where it can be seen in a scene set in Seuss's room. The iQ Player is a handheld plug-and-play version of the Nintendo 64, developed specifically for the Chinese market. Released exclusively in China, it was created through a joint venture between Nintendo and engineer Wei Yan, in response to the Chinese government's 2000 ban on traditional home video game consoles. The device combined both the console and controller into a single unit that connects directly to a television, with a separate accessory available for multiplayer games. The iQ company was established in December of 2002, with Yen, who had previously worked on the Nintendo 64 project at Silicon Graphics, leading the effort. His company, named Broad On, was responsible for developing the iQ Player's cryptographic security system, designed to combat software piracy. In order to comply with regulations and potentially influence the reversal of the console ban, Nintendo marketed the iQ Player with a focus on educational and developmental value. Features like a real-time clock allowed players to set time limits on gameplay, and built-in messages promoted healthy gaming habits by encouraging breaks and discouraging extended play sessions. Project Reality was the codename for what would eventually become the Nintendo 64. In early 1993, Jim Clark of Silicon Graphics met with Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi. By August of that year, during Nintendo's annual trade show, the two companies officially announced a joint development and licensing agreement under the name Project Reality. Super Mario 64 2 was a planned sequel to Super Mario 64 intended for release in 1999 on the Nintendo 64 DD. However, the project was cancelled early in development due to both slow progress and the commercial failure of the 64 DD. Only one demo level was ever created, and it was never shown to the public. The The game was set to include features and characters originally cut from Super Mario 64, such as Luigi as a playable character and a rideable Yoshi. It was also intended to support at least 2 players, with Shigeru Miyamoto's early demo level reportedly designed as a multiplayer experience. Another potential sequel was Super Mario 128, which began development under that name in 1997. It was first shown publicly as a tech demo at Space World 2000. The demo famously featured 128 Marios on screen simultaneously and introduced mechanics like sphere walking and gravity-based gameplay. These concepts would later influence games such as Super Mario Galaxy and The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. The 8 starting characters from the original Smash Bros. Game appear in the Character Select menu in chronological order of when they first debuted. These characters, in order, are Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, Samus, Yoshi, Kirby, Fox, and Pikachu. Mario and Donkey Kong both appeared in the original Donkey Kong game in 1981. Link first appeared in The Legend of Zelda in January of 1986. Samus first appeared in Metroid in August of 1986. Yoshi first appeared in Super Mario World in 1990. Kirby's first appearance was in Kirby Dream Land, published in 1992. The original Star Fox video game, featuring the titular character, was published in 1993, and the iconic face of the Pokemon franchise, Pikachu, first appeared in Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green in 1996. The Golden N64 console was released in both the USA and Japan as a Toys R Us exclusive. The North American version came bundled with not just a single, but 2 golden controllers. It was never officially released in Europe, although the UK did receive a charcoal-colored Nintendo 64 with a gold controller. The console is sometimes referred to as the Zelda N64, despite having no official connection to the Zelda franchise. The Mario Artist series is a suite of creative multimedia applications developed for the Nintendo 64 DD, comprising 3 interactive games: Paint Studio, Talent Studio, and Polygon Studio. Alongside the communication kit, the suite was designed to transform the console into a comprehensive internet-enabled multimedia workstation. Launched in Japan starting in December of 1999, the suite was part of a bundle that included the 64DD hardware, software discs, accessories, and a subscription to the RandNet online service. Paint Studio, released on December 11, 1999, is a Mario-themed painting application that allows users to engage in artistic creation using a range of brushes, textures, stamps, and animation tools. Talent Studio, which followed on February 23 of 2000, is an animation tool that lets users superimpose captured images, such as faces, onto 3D models created in Polygon Studio. These models can be customized with a wide array of clothing and accessories and brought to life with sound, music, and visual effects. The communication kit, released on June 29 of 2000, provided online functionality via the now defunct RandNet dial-up service, enabling users to share creations, participate in contests, and even order printed versions of their work. Several planned expansions to the Mario Artist suite never materialized. SoundMaker, which would have allowed music creation, was cancelled, along with 3 other proposed but unreleased titles: Game Maker, Graphical Message Maker, and Video Jockey Maker. The Mario Artist suite significantly influenced later Nintendo projects. Talent Studio, for instance, laid the groundwork for the unreleased GameCube title's stage debut, which ultimately contributed to the creation of the Mii avatars and their use in titles such as Wii Sports. The Pikachu Hates Sony legend is an urban myth tied to the game Hey You Pikachu. During the height of the 1990s console rivalry between Nintendo and Sony's PlayStation, rumors began circulating that saying Sony or PlayStation to Pikachu would cause him to become angry. However, it was later confirmed that neither of these terms was actually included in the game's word recognition library. It is believed that any instances of Pikachu appearing upset after hearing these words were likely the result of the game misinterpreting them as a similar sounding word that was in the library and associated with negative reactions. The resurgence of interest in retro gaming has led to a significant increase in counterfeit Nintendo 64 games on the market. These fake cartridges often have several telltale signs that differentiate them from authentic ones. One of the most notable differences is weight. Counterfeit cartridges typically feel lighter than genuine N64 games. Additionally, the plastic shell may appear in a slightly off shade of gray, and the overall build quality can feel cheaper. Labels on fake cartridges often have visible flaws or just don't look quite right, with colors, fonts, or alignment appearing off. A common detail to check is the seal of quality printed on the front label. Many counterfeit versions mistakenly capitalize the O in of. Screws used in fake cartridges also tend to look crudely manufactured, as if roughly cut by machine rather than professionally finished. Mother 3 began development in 1994 for the Super Famicom, known internationally as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, continuing the legacy of Mother 2, released as Earthbound in the West. Much of the original Mother 2 team carried over to this new project, though some members left and the team grew significantly. Inspired by the groundbreaking 3D design of Super Mario 64, the developers aimed to create a similarly expansive, open-world 3D experience. However, their initial technical ambitions exceeded the hardware limitations of the Super Famicom, prompting a mid-development shift in focus to the Nintendo 64 DD in hopes of accommodating the game's large scope. Plans for a North American release were announced under the name Earthbound 64, and a playable version was showcased at Nintendo's Space World 1999 trade show. Reports at the time indicated the game was roughly halfway complete. Despite this, the project was abruptly cancelled in 2000 by producer Satoru Iwata, just before that year's Space World event. Iwata emphasized that the Mother franchise wasn't being abandoned, but development for the Nintendo 64 platform was ending. Shigeru Miyamoto later explained that the cancellation wasn't due to insurmountable technical issues, but rather because the company needed to reallocate resources to the development of the upcoming GameCube, then known as Project Dolphin. By the time of its cancellation, Mother 3 was estimated to be about 60% complete, with its story and design largely finished and only programming remaining. Shigesato Itoi, the series creator, estimated that it would have taken 2 more years to finish the game properly. Iwata acknowledged that the game might have been completed by 2000 if its scope had been reduced earlier in development. Ultimately, after years of uncertainty, Mother 3 was successfully reimagined and released in 2006 for the Game Boy Advance, marking the long-awaited continuation of the series. The Four Bonds hoax, often referred to as All Bonds mode, is a well-known myth among fans of GoldenEye 007. The hoax began in 1998 when Electronic Gaming Monthly featured it as part of their annual April Fool's joke. They published a doctored screenshot that appeared to show a cheat option allowing players to play as 4 different James Bond actors: Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and Timothy Dalton. This prank led to widespread confusion and speculation that persisted for years, with many players uncertain if the mode was truly unlockable. Over time, the hoax took on various names, including All Bonds Cheat, All Bonds Code, and 4 Bonds Cheat. It falsely claimed that Rareware had hidden or removed the ability to play as all 4 bonds, and that this content could be unlocked through secret methods or even specialized software. These rumors were often accompanied by elaborate stories, such as claims that the feature existed in a beta version or had been cut late in development. In a 2020 interview, former Rareware developers confirmed that there had indeed been early plans to include multiple James Bond actors in the game. However, this idea was scrapped because only Pierce Brosnan's likeness had been approved for use. The likeness rights for Connery, Moore, and Dalton were never secured, leading to their removal from the final version of the game for those legal reasons. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, known as Tony Hawk's Skateboarding in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Europe, is a skateboarding video game developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. Released for the PlayStation on December 29th of 1999, it marked the first entry in the now iconic Tony Hawk series. The game quickly gained popularity for its fast-paced, trick-based gameplay and intuitive controls. The objective of the game is to perform skateboarding tricks and combos to rack up points and complete level-specific goals. It was later ported to the Nintendo 64 by Edge of Reality and released on March 15th of 2000. While the port stayed true to the original's content, retaining all levels, characters, and game modes, some changes were made due to limitations of the cartridge format. Notably, the N64 version had a reduced soundtrack and removed voice clips. The game also lacked the blood effects found in the PlayStation version, which allowed Nintendo to market the game with an E for everyone rating. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was a major success and spawned 2 direct sequels on the Nintendo 64. The final installment to appear on the console, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, was released on August 20th, 2002 and holds the distinction of being the last game released worldwide for the N64. Banjo-Tooie is widely regarded as having some of the most advanced and effective anti-piracy measures ever implemented on the Nintendo 64. These protections were so robust that the game's ROM wasn't fully cracked until 2012, over a decade after its original release in 2000. The Nintendo 64 version of Banjo-Tooie includes two major layers of anti-piracy security. The first occurs immediately when the game is powered on. It checks for the correct type of save chip. If the chip is missing or the type is incorrect, the game responds by acting as though no controller is plugged in and all button inputs are ignored, preventing further progress. The second and more complex measure involves a series of checks against the cartridge's CIC, the Checking Integrated Circuit Lockout chip. What sets Banjo-Tooie apart is the sheer number of checks, 268 in total, performed throughout the game. These checks are not just for validation, they are integral to gameplay as they decrypt various game assets. If even one check fails, the game can no longer decrypt the required data and will freeze, making pirated or incorrectly emulated copies virtually unplayable. Although the Nintendo 64 design was mostly complete by mid-1995, its release was delayed until 1996 to ensure that key launch titles, Super Mario 64, Pilot Wings 64, and the Japan exclusive, Saikyo Habu Shogi, were finished in time. MIPS Tech LLC is an American semiconductor company that designs processor architectures and cores for various applications. The Nintendo 64 console uses an MIPS R4300i CPU as its main processor. An EverDrive 64 is a special game cartridge for the Nintendo 64 that includes a micro SD card slot. Users can download games onto the micro SD card from a PC, insert it into the EverDrive, and play those games directly on the N64 console. Dr. Mario 64 is a 2001 tile-matching action puzzle game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It serves as an enhanced remake of the original Dr. Mario, which first launched in 1990 for the NES and Game Boy. The game features a falling block mechanic set within a medicine bottle filled with red, blue, and yellow viruses. Players control two colored capsules that fall into the bottle, and they must maneuver these capsules left or right and rotate them to align matching colors. When 4 or more capsule halves or viruses of the same color are aligned horizontally or vertically, they are cleared from the field. The goal is to eliminate all viruses without letting the capsules pile up to the top of the bottle's neck. Players earn points for successfully removing viruses, and the game ends in a loss if the field becomes too full to continue. For no discernible reason I can identify, this was one of my favorite games for the Nintendo 64. I loved it so much that I played Super Smash Bros. Melee exclusively to play as Dr. Mario. I was obsessed with Dr. Mario. In 1996, Time magazine named the Nintendo 64 its Machine of the Year. The magazine praised the console not just for its entertainment value, but for its technological significance and potential to inspire the next generation's interest in digital environments, emphasizing its status as the first console to offer fully immersive 3D environments. The Power Glove was a controller accessory for the Nintendo Entertainment System that attracted attention for its early use of motion control and heavy marketing. Despite this, it failed commercially, largely due to its imprecise, difficult-to-use controls and the fact that it wasn't bundled with any games, resulting in poor sales for its two dedicated titles. A similar concept appeared later in the form of the unlicensed N64 Glove controller. This wearable, glove-like accessory mimicked the design of the Power Glove but included standard controller buttons, making it compatible with Nintendo 64 games. In 1995, as Nintendo prepared for the launch of its next-generation console, the company sought to maintain public interest amid growing competition from Sega and the rising dominance of Sony. One major strategy was the announcement of a Dream Team, a group of elite hardware and software partners assembled to support and develop for the upcoming platform. This initiative was unveiled in a 6-page feature in the April 1995 issue of Nintendo Power, which described the team as an exclusive club of developers whose early games would be released only on the Nintendo 64. The Dream Team included a wide range of partners. On the hardware side were Rhombus, Silicon Graphics, and Nintendo itself. Software tools were to be supplied by companies like Alias Research, Multigen, and Software Creations. As for game development, a number of major studios were granted early access to development tools and support from both Nintendo and SGI. Initial exclusive developers included Acclaim, Angel Studios, DMA Design, Paradigm, Rare, Sierra Online, Software Creations, Spectrum Holobyte, and Williams Industries. Nintendo also counted itself among the developers. Following the initial announcement, other companies such as Ocean, Time Warner Interactive, and Mindscape joined the Dream Team. The Super Pad Plus is a third-party Nintendo 64 controller manufactured by Interact, featuring a distinctive design that sets it apart from the official N64 controller. Both the analog stick and D-pad are positioned on the left side, with the control pad located on the top left corner. All of the buttons on the controller are noticeably larger and protruded more than those on the standard model. Additionally, the L and R buttons stood out prominently, extending higher than their counterparts on Nintendo's original design. I'm not sure what this entry is referencing. The Nintendo 64 was never officially released in India as far as any research I did could tell, and I couldn't find anything about an attempted or planned release of the console in or around the year 2000 in India. The Asai Wheel 64 is an alternate Nintendo 64 controller which comes in the form of a steering wheel, obviously intended for driving games. Doshin the Giant is a god simulation game developed by Param and originally released for the Nintendo 64's 64DD peripheral in Japan on December 1st of 1999. Published by RandNet DD, the game places players in control of Doshin, a yellow giant who interacts with island inhabitants through godlike powers. As a love giant, Doshin performs benevolent tasks such as reshaping terrain, responding to villager prayers, and managing natural disasters. In return, the villagers express love, which Doshin absorbs, allowing him to grow in size temporarily. The game also allows Doshin to transform into his darker alter ego Joshin, the hate giant. Unlike Doshin's peaceful nature, Joshin is destructive and inspires fear and anger in the villagers, absorbing hate to grow in size. The game was met with positive reviews for its unique gameplay and concept. The Wide Boy units are development tools created by Intelligent Systems, a subsidiary of Nintendo, to assist game developers and licensees. These systems allowed Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games to be played and tested on a TV screen or monitor, offering a clearer and more practical alternative to the small, low-quality screens of the handheld consoles. In addition to development use, game magazines and retailers often used Wide Boys to showcase and promote games to the public more effectively. Ura Zelda was a planned expansion for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and was developed for the Nintendo 64 DD. Intended to enhance the original game with new content, Ura Zelda ultimately went unreleased due to the commercial failure of the 64 DD. During early development, Nintendo had planned two distinct expansions for Ocarina of Time. Ura Zelda, which would feature alternate and more challenging dungeons along with new enemies, and Zelda Gaiden, which introduced a different overworld and an entirely new storyline. While Zelda Gaiden eventually evolved into The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, Ura Zelda never saw any official release. One of the most intriguing features of Ura Zelda was the Unicorn Fountain, a mysterious unreleased location that was rumored to contain the Triforce and teach Link the Sword Beam attack. Technically, Ura Zelda functioned more like a patch than a standalone game. It was designed to work with the original Ocarina of Time cartridge. Players would insert the cartridge into the main Nintendo 64 console while placing the Ura Zelda expansion disc into the 64 DD. When connected properly, the game's title screen would slightly change to display a disc icon indicating the expansion was active. Due to the limited storage capacity of Nintendo 64 cartridges, which maxed out at 32 to 64 megabytes, Ura Zelda could not be released in cartridge form. The 64 DD's additional space made the expansion feasible, but its poor market performance sealed Ura Zelda's fate. The Nintendo 64's power LED can be customized through a simple hardware modification. By replacing the original red LED with one of a different color, users can change the appearance of the console's power indicator. Mario no Photopai is a Japan-exclusive educational game released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998. The game focuses on creativity and user-generated content, allowing players to design custom images using Mario-themed clip art, borders, fonts, and other graphical elements. These compositions can then be turned into postcards, name cards, posters or slideshow presentations. A unique feature of Mario no Photopie is its ability to import images from personal computers or digital cameras, which can be edited and integrated into the game's templates. Players could also export their final creations to a computer or a Fuji printing kiosk for physical printing. In a 2017 retrospective, Jason Johnson of Vice described the game as one part Photoshop, one part Mario Paint. Due to its obscurity, Mario no Photopie has become a collector's item, with copies often listed on eBay for over $500. The Nintendo 64 was originally scheduled for release by Christmas of 1995, but its launch was delayed multiple times. In May of 1995, Nintendo pushed the release to April 21, 1996, citing the need for more time to refine the console software and allow third-party developers to complete their games. The release date was later postponed again, this time to June 23, 1996. To maintain consumer interest and prevent potential buyers from turning to rival consoles already on the market, Nintendo launched an early marketing campaign. The ads featured slogans such as "Wait for it" and "Is it worth the wait? Only if you want the best." Using certain incorrect cables to connect a Nintendo 64 to a television can result in oversaturated brightness coming from the console. The TriStar 64 is an unlicensed add-on for the Nintendo 64, developed by Future Laboratory in Hong Kong. It features 2 additional cartridge slots that allows users to play NES and SNES games on the Nintendo 64. In addition to its backwards compatibility, the TriStar 64 includes built-in cheat support through a program called the X-Terminator and a memory editor that lets users archive and modify saved game data. The Nintendo 64 DD was initially offered in Japan through a mail order system as part of the RANNet starter kit. This kit included the 64 DD hardware, a 1-year subscription to RANNet, and 6 games that were delivered by mail. Although the 64 DD later became available in some retail stores, the mail order subscription remained a central method for obtaining the device. The phrase, "Every copy of Super Mario 64 is personalized," originates from a creepypasta mythos that gained popularity in 2019. This fictional narrative claims that the game was secretly programmed with an experimental personalization AI that altered characters, levels, and content based on each player's desires and behavior. Allegedly, this AI was too unpredictable and was later removed from future versions of the game. The mythos gained traction around November of 2019 with the emergence of the Wario Apparition, a surreal fabricated event supposedly encountered by players. Fans began sharing false memories and unsettling dreams about the game, which some treated as actual in-game phenomena. While most contributors understood the story was fictional, many resonated with specific elements of the story, such as the eerie atmosphere of Wet Dry World, often described as having a negative emotional aura. The creepypasta inspired a wide range of fan content, including mods, eerie videos, and parodies, all contributing to the theory's lasting appeal. Super Mario 64 was originally planned to be ported and enhanced for the Nintendo 64 DD. However, due to the commercial failure of the peripheral, this version of the game was never officially released. Footage of the Super Mario Disc version displayed at Space World 1996 later surfaced online, confirming it was primarily a demonstration for the 64 DD hardware. Interestingly, Nintendo produced a disc sticker specifically for this version, suggesting there might have been plans to serve as an add-on or expanded content for the original game. In June of 2014, a French collector discovered a physical copy of the 64 DD port at a secondhand store in Japan, and footage of this version appeared online. Compared to the original cartridge release, the 64 DD version features slightly improved textures, different music in Peach's Castle, some additional bugs, and noticeably larger load times. This Iceberg entry is simply a reference to the fact that there was never a digital pinball game released on the Nintendo 64 console. Aftermarket games are titles created for gaming systems after their official lifetimes have ended. The lifetime of a system can be defined either as the time when its last licensed game was released, or when the company officially stopped supporting it, with most people considering the former as the standard. An example of a modern creator working with retro hardware is Remute, a German DJ known for programming music directly onto game cartridges for various classic systems. One notable aftermarket game is Xeno Crisis, a multi-directional shooter originally released in 2019 as a homeroom title by Bitmap Bureau. It was later ported to the N64. Pokémon Stadium is a 1999 strategy game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. The gameplay centers around a 3D turn-based battle system featuring the original 151 Pokémon from the Game Boy titles Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Players assemble teams of 6 Pokémon, either imported from their Game Boy games using the transfer pack or selected from preset Pokémon within Stadium. Although 6 Pokémon make up the party, only 3 can be used in each individual battle. This was one of my favorite games on the entire system, and I'm not even a massive Pokémon fan. Animal Forest is the first game in the Animal Crossing series, released exclusively in Japan for the Nintendo 64. Nintendo initially limited its release to Japan due to concerns about the game's heavy reliance on text and Japanese cultural references, including holidays that were difficult to translate. The game was later remade for the GameCube in 2002 and released worldwide under the title Animal Crossing. 12 Tales Conquer 64 was a cancelled Nintendo 64 game originally announced as Conker's Quest at E3 1997. The game was designed as a family-friendly platformer similar to Rare's handheld title Conker's Pocket Tales. However, after the success of other Rare games like Banjo-Kazooie and Diddy Kong Racing, the developers faced criticism for producing another innocent animal-themed platformer. In response, Rare decided to completely redesign the game to target a more mature audience, leading to Conker's Bad Fur Day, which was released in 2001. LodgeNet was a hotel game streaming service for the SNES, Nintendo 64, and GameCube. Launched in late 1993, LodgeNet delivered SNES games to hotel guests worldwide through proprietary building-wide networks. By April 1996, the service had reached 200,000 hotel guest room installations globally. On June 16, 1998, Nintendo and LodgeNet signed a 10-year licensing agreement to upgrade the service and add Nintendo 64 support to their existing 500,000 SNES-equipped rooms. The LodgeNet Nintendo 64 controller lacked a pack slot, meaning it did not support controller pack, rumble pack, or transfer pack accessories. The slot was sealed with a plastic cover. The Nintendo 64 games available on LodgeNet included Donkey Kong 64, Dr. Mario 64, Mario Golf, Mario Kart 64, Mario Party 3, Mario Tennis, Paper Mario, Super Mario 64, and Super Smash Bros. The Dr. V64, developed by Bung Enterprises and released in 1996, is a development and backup device for the Nintendo 64. Priced around $450, it was one of the first commercially available backup devices for the system and served as a lower-cost alternative to the official partner N64 development kit made by Silicon Graphics and Nintendo. While marketed as a development machine, the V64 could be modified to create and play commercial game backups, making it popular among those distributing unlicensed copies. Some third-party developers even used multiple V64 units during game development, such as with the game Turok Dinosaur Hunter. However, its unofficial status caused conflict with Nintendo, which pursued legal action worldwide to stop its sale. Nintendo sued Bung and retailers in Europe and North America for copyright infringement, eventually securing court orders banning the sale of Dr. V64 units in the United States. Luigi's Mansion 64 is a 2015 ROM hack of Super Mario 64 created by Mario Crash and Mimi. The hack features 111 collectible stars, rebranded as Starlings, and significantly alter the game's levels while maintaining the basic overworld structure. The stages are heavily modified and rearranged to fit the new Haunted Mansion theme, though they are based on the same core areas from Super Mario 64. In this retelling, Princess Toadstool summons Luigi to her castle, which has been taken over by King Boo. Toad, stationed outside the castle, informs Luigi that King Boo has captured the princess and imprisoned everyone within the Haunted Mansion's walls. King Boo has also scattered the starlings among paintings inside the mansion. Luigi must dive into these magical paintings, retrieve the starlings, and battle through various haunted environments to confront King Boo. As Luigi progresses, he uncovers new areas of the mansion, eventually reaching King Boo's domain. The final showdown involves 3 encounters with the ghostly villain. To access the battle, Luigi needs 100 starlings to unlock a pipe on the mansion's roof. After a tough fight, King Boo concedes defeat and grants Luigi a giant starling. Luigi uses it to obtain a wing cap and soars back to the mansion. When the wing cap disappears, the giant starling releases Princess Peach, who thanks Luigi with a kiss. The song Murder Murder by Eminem mentions the Nintendo 64 console in the following lyrics. Run in they crib and at least leave with some little cheap stuff, acting like they never seen nobody hit a lick before. Smash the window, grab the Nintendo 64, when they sell out in stores, the price triples. In 2017, YouTuber Metal Jesus Rocks found a prototype of a US version of the 64DD and made a video presenting the hardware. I will leave a link to this video in the description. The Hyundai Comboy 64 was created due to a distribution issue in South Korea caused by an import ban on Japanese products, which nearly blocked the official release of the Nintendo 64 there. To work around this, Hyundai took over distribution, prompting a name change to the unusual Comboy 64. Shortly after production of the Comboy began, the import ban was lifted, allowing the official Nintendo 64 to be released in South Korea as well. Because the Comboy 64 had a very short production run, it became a rare collector's item, with units priced for as much as $1,000. Saikyo Habu Shogi is a Japanese virtual board game developed and published by Seta for the Nintendo 64. Released exclusively in Japan on June 23rd of 1996, it was one of the console's 3 launch titles alongside Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64. Its notable feature was the inclusion of Shogi champion Yoshiharu Habu, who had won all 7 major Shogi titles in the release year. Although expected to be a bestseller and a showcase for the N64's capabilities, Saikyo Habu Shogi saw disappointing sales, with roughly only 1 copy sold for each 100 consoles at launch. The RF modulator is a device designed to connect the Nintendo 64 console to older televisions that only have RF inputs. This accessory enables the console's video and audio signals to be transmitted through standard TV antenna channels. As a result, players could enjoy Nintendo 64 games on vintage TVs by tuning to either Channel 3 or Channel 4. Development of GoldenEye 007 began in late 1994, originating from a pitch by Martin Hollis, a mid-level programmer who had just completed Killer Instinct, his first project with the company. Although Rare and Nintendo approved the pitch, their enthusiasm was moderate at best, so they assigned Hollis a small, mostly inexperienced team. Among the 9-person crew, Hollis was the only member with substantial hands-on game development experience. Dinosaur Planet was an action-adventure game originally developed by Rare and planned for release on the Nintendo 64 with Nintendo as its publisher. As development progressed, the project was shifted to the Nintendo GameCube. However, Nintendo ultimately directed Rare to rework the game into a new entry in the Star Fox series, which led to the cancellation of Dinosaur Planet in its original form. Despite being rebranded, many core elements of Dinosaur Planet remained in the final product, Star Fox Adventures. Although the original Dinosaur Planet was never officially released, a significant amount of development material still exists. This includes concept art, music tracks, trailers, and even an hour of gameplay footage, showcasing the game's design, mechanics, and narrative direction. The Nintendo 64 can display up to 6,777,216 colors, although the actual color usage is often constrained by the memory limitations of individual game cartridges. Mario Kart 64 was initially planned as a launch title for the Nintendo 64 and was unveiled alongside the console in November of 1995. However, development efforts were soon redirected towards completing Super Mario 64, which ended up launching with the system. As a result, Mario Kart 64 was delayed, even though it was reportedly around 95% complete at the time of its reveal. Most estimates placed final sales of the Sega Saturn's Japanese run at around 7 million units, with the Nintendo 64 close behind at approximately 6.8 million. Regardless, both consoles were overwhelmingly outpaced by Sony's PlayStation across all regions. The PS1 sold a staggering 102 million units worldwide, including 40 million in North America, 40 million in Europe, and 21 million in Asia. Among the rarest Nintendo 64 controllers ever produced are those created by Fox Data, a UK-based company known for its bold and unconventional designs. In the summer of 1997, Fox Data began running full-page advertisements promoting chrome-plated N64 consoles and controllers. They even offered a unique service where customers could mail in their own systems to have them chromed. The initial color options for these custom controllers included chrome, copper, gold, and electric blue. Later that year, in time for the holiday season, Fox Data launched a second wave of N64 controller designs. These custom-painted controllers featured themes such as Red Rain, Chrome Leopard, Purple Rain, and Desert Storm. Netscape was the first company to seriously attempt to capitalize on the growing potential of the World Wide Web. Founded on April 4, 1994, under the name Mosaic Communications Corporation, it was the result of a collaboration between Silicon Graphics founder Jim Clark and software prodigy Mark Andreessen, who had worked on the Mosaic web browser. Interestingly, the original discussions between Clark and Andreessen weren't about web software at all. They initially pitched a 20-page concept for an online gaming network to Nintendo for use with the Nintendo 64. However, the deal fell through when Nintendo insisted on maintaining full control of its console. Sharkwire Online was an unofficial peripheral for the Nintendo 64 developed by Interact, best known for its GameShark cheat devices. Launched in January of 2000 and sold exclusively in the United States, Sharkwire Online was essentially a modified GameShark, with a built-in modem and serial port. It was paired with a now-defunct dial-up internet portal that allowed players to access limited online features. These features included the ability to upload and download game save data using the controller pack, as well as download cheat codes directly onto the cartridges. The Lawson Station Nintendo 64 model was released exclusively in Japan and is often referred to as the Lawson Station N64. It was obtainable only through a lottery promotion held in partnership with Lawson, a major convenience store chain in Japan. While it's considered an extremely rare version of the console, there has never been official confirmation that it was licensed by Nintendo. Most evidence suggests it may have simply been a standard Japanese charcoal N64 with a special Lawson-themed sticker applied. Despite the mystery surrounding its licensing, the Lawson Station N64 remains a highly sought-after item among collectors. Final Fantasy VII was originally planned as a 2D title for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Development began with a 2D prototype, but the project was temporarily put on hold so the team could focus on completing Chrono Trigger. After the game's release, work on Final Fantasy VII resumed in 1995. Initially, the team debated whether to stick with the familiar 2D format or embrace the emerging trend of 3D gaming. Choosing the 3D route meant adopting new development methods and hardware. They considered both Nintendo's cartridge-based Nintendo 64 and Sony's CD-ROM-based PlayStation as potential platforms. Two main factors influenced their decision: a successful tech demo based on Final Fantasy VI, created using soft image 3D software, and the rising cost of cartridges, which was shrinking Square's potential audience. Although Square briefly explored a Nintendo 64 version, intending to use the upcoming 64DD peripheral, they quickly ran into major technical limitations. For example, rendering a single behemoth monster at 2000 polygons severely taxed the N64 hardware, causing performance issues. Confronted with technical and economic hurdles, Square ultimately abandoned the Nintendo 64. The company instead shifted development of Final Fantasy VII and all future projects to Sony's PlayStation, taking full advantage of the system's CD-ROM format. And that, my friends, is the Nintendo 64 Iceberg. What was your favorite entry? Also, what are some of your favorite memories with the Nintendo 64? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.